Hey everyone, Olivia Issa here from Issa Fit, and today we're going to be making a low-waist whale plushie. And the part of this project that makes it quote-unquote low-waist is we're going to be using fabric scraps from another project to make the outside of the whale, and then on the inside I'm going to stuff it with some old scraps from projects that I couldn't use to make anything else. So ends of thread that were too small to use again, or fabric scraps that are too small. I've been using a little basket to keep track of all the little scraps from my projects, especially when making face masks and small projects like that. There's a lot that can be reused as batting for things like plushies. So I'm going to be using that. Feel free to use your traditional batting if you prefer, but I really like that option to cut down on waste. I got that idea from an Instagram friend I love following. Her Instagram handle is life5vv. I can put her account below, but definitely be sure to check that out. She's great on low waste and sustainable projects. So to get going on this, we're going to need our whale plushie pattern, which I have cut out here and you can download for free on my blog. I also have fabric. This is left over from an old project. You can tell if it's the right size if you open it up, and you can place your pattern pieces at least twice out in full on your fabric. So I can do that here so I know this is big enough. And then I'm going to need my basic sewing supplies, some thread, a bobbin, and some pins, as well as my sewing machine, scissors, and then as you can see on the side of the whale piece, there's an optional button eye and little embroidered smile, which I have here on my practice plushie. It makes it look a bit cuter in my opinion. And so to do that, you're going to need 2 little buttons and some embroidery floss in the color that you want your smile to be. So to get started, I've already cut out my paper pattern pieces. So I'm going to open my fabric up and fold it actually inside out. So we have fold, and when it says on the pattern, align with fold, I'm going to line that up with, again, like you can tell, the fold of the fabric. Then I'm going to place the side of the whale onto the fabric as well. And then I'm going to cut around the pattern pieces, not leaving any seam allowance. This project includes seam allowance in the pattern. So you can either trace with a pen if you'd like, or just pin your pattern pieces to the fabric and cut around that. So that's what I'm going to do. So now I have my 2 pattern pieces pinned down. The belly of the whale is pinned along the fold. So this is going to open up into one piece when I cut it. And the side of the whale is not pinned along the fold, so I'm going to cut it and it's going to be 2 separate pieces. So now the belly of the whale is one big long piece. If I open it up, see it's sparkly, I'll lay that out here. And then the side of the whale is 2 smaller pieces. And now is the point where if you'd like to add a face to your whale, we're going to do that before sewing any of the pieces together. So I marked on the pattern where the face will go. You can sort of estimate it, but I like to take my button, sort of place it roughly where it is on the pattern, hold it above, and then take the pattern away and lay it down. That's where my button will be. And I'll repeat that on the other side. And then using my embroidery floss for this, I'm going to sew the button down I am deciding to use my embroidery floss for this just because I'd like the button and the mouth to match for this, but you can decide to use your normal thread for the button if you'd like. So now I have eyes on both of the sides of my whale. And now I'm going to add a face or a smile. So I'm going to flip over so I'm looking at the underside of the fabric. I'm going to sort of compare my pattern piece to the piece I have laid out now. And using a pen or a pencil or chalk or whatever you have available, you can go ahead and try and estimate where the smile is from the pattern. And draw that right onto the fabric. Repeat that on both sides. And now taking your embroidery floss, embroider along those two lines that you just drew so you have a little smile. And I'm going to be using sort of just a short stitch length of a straight stitch. So it'll look like a thin smile. So here we have the underside of the side of the whale. Here's the front. Here's the underside, and I'm going to start here at the tip of the smile. And pull my needle through on the other side, poking through where I drew my line. And now to make my smile continuous, I'm going to use the stitch where I poke through on another point down the line of my smile, pull it through, and then on the top side, I'm going to pull my needle back through where my last stitch ended. So you can see I'm making a continuous line. I'm going to repeat that down the line of my smile. Now I don't need to go to the end of the fabric because that is going to be my seam allowance. I'm going to sew over here when I sew together all my sides. So I'm going to cut my thread, knot it off, and then I'll be done with the smile. So now we have faces sewn on both pieces of the side of the whale piece. And so I'm going to take one and begin to attach it to the belly of the whale. Here's the end of the belly of the whale where it comes in to its thinnest point is where we're going to match the end of the side of the whale. And I'm going to face the outsides of the fabric, so for me, the sparkly sides, towards each other and place the end of the side of the whale at that smallest point on the belly of the whale. I'm not quite going to match it exactly, but I'm going to put it about half a fingernail over from the smallest point on the belly of the whale. And I'm going to pin those pieces together. And I'm going to continue down this bottom edge of the side of the whale, pinning it to the side of the belly of the whale. Matching up these edges very precisely. And you can see I'm using a pretty small seam allowance here just because this is a pretty small project, but you can use bigger seam allowance if you'd like, and it would end up being a bit smaller of a whale. And now, as we get to the end of the bottom edge of the side of the whale, I'm going to turn and begin to pin along this side edge of the side of the whale, where the face is. I'm going to try and keep this corner matched up and pin along this edge. Again, once I get to the top, I'm going to turn and continue to pin, matching up the corners to make sure the edges stay connected or in line with one another. Once I get to the end here, again, I'm going to leave about half fingernails length off here. I'm going to keep this pinned together so there shouldn't be any holes when you sew this up. And you can see we sort of have our tail fin aligned here. So this will be roughly aligned together once we sew this all together. So now I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew a thin straight stitch along this edge that we just pinned. So here we've sewn the side of the whale to the belly of the whale. And when you turn it right side out, you can see this plushie sort of starting to take shape. So we just need to add the other side. And to do that, we're going to do the same thing as we did before, pin it together, but this time leave a little space here about the length of your thumb that will allow us to turn the plushie right side out when we're done and stuff it with our batting. So I'm going to turn this inside out again, pull out our other side of the whale, face it in, and line up the base with where we lined up the other one. You sort of want to compare the other to this one just to be sure you're getting it evenly. And so now we're pinning, but once we get to the space below the face, we are going to work to leave this space open. We're going to mark this to leave this space open so that once we're finished with the plushie, we can turn it right side out using this hole and stuff it with batting as well. So now I'm going to sew along here, I'm going to stop, and then I'm going to start again after this little break and sew up the rest. So now we have both sides of the whale sewn, and we have a little opening down here. And the next step is to connect the tail. So to do this, we're going to note where we stopped sewing the sides. And we're going to start sewing a little bit below that. So I'm going to get on my sewing machine and start just a little bit in from where we ended, maybe here, so that we don't have any holes. I'm going to try and continue that line up and around, and you can see this is not an exact match. That will happen sometimes. The goal is to get it to be exact, but that's not always possible, so that's fine. So just follow a little bit inside, leave a small seam allowance so that there are no holes. You're going to sew all the way around the tail with a straight stitch as well. And you're going to end up back here, and you're going to do the same thing. You're going to start a little bit under where you left off sewing the sides to the belly of the whale. And so we're going to sew along here with our sewing machine. Now that I've sewn the tail of my whale together, I have stitching going up and around. I can turn my whale right side out through this hole we left. And then to get a crisp tail, I'm going to use a pin and pull out the corners of the tail. Now might be a good good time to iron the edges of your whale if you want crisp edges. My fabric crisps pretty easily when I pinch it, but if yours doesn't, pull out and iron it. And now through the hole that I've left at the bottom, I'm going to stuff the whale with our fabric scrap pattern. So I'm going to pull out my big bucket of fabric scraps and try and get any pieces that will fit through the hole without making a mess or opening the hole too much. And I'm going to stuff it until it's firm, so it'll probably take a little while, and that's okay. You want it to be pretty firm so it'll stand up. And before your whale gets too full, you're going to want to push stuffing back into the tail so it stands up. You're going to want to use your smallest pieces to do that. So now that my whale is about as thick as I want it, I am going to sew closed this little opening that we left. So you can do this on your sewing machine, but I prefer to do it by hand just to make sure I get the exact shape I want. So I'm going to take a needle and matching thread and just sew up using a straight stitch, sew that hole shut. There you go. That's how you make a plushie. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. For more tutorials, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and also check out my blog, elisafit.com, link below. Thanks.